This is a cat on a hot tin roof, and she is what felinologists call Calico. Calicos aren't a specific breed of cat, and they're not from any one particular region, but instead, they're just a coat pattern that can be found in all of these breeds. This cat is wondering why nearly every other calico cat is also a girl. So, the other day, I interviewed 3,000 calicos, and only one of them said he was a male. What's going on here? Researching this topic felt like herding cats, so in order to visualize things, I made a simulation. To start, let's breed some cats with different coat colors and see what happens. Here's one calico female with one orange male. I've colored the parents by their sex, and the children by their coat color. The offspring is orange. Okay, let's try it a few more times. This one is calico, this one is orange, this one's gray, and this one's orange. It seems like the coat color is randomly selected. Now, let's try breeding 100 times, and here's a counter on the right to keep track. Interesting. 1/2 of the offspring are orange, 1/4 are gray, and 1/4 are calico. It looks like the orange offspring are the most likely between one calico and one orange. Let's try it with some other combinations of coats. Here's one calico female bred with one gray male. Now, 1/2 are gray, 1/4 are orange, and 1/4 are calico. Now gray is favored. Let's just see one more. How about one orange female and one gray male? Even stranger, now 1/2 is calico, and the other half is orange, and none of the children are gray whatsoever. If we mark each cat by their sex, we'll notice something stranger. All of the calico cats are female, and all of the orange cats are male. This is all getting very confusing. So, I went to the library, and I found this bio textbook, and it says that if we want to find out about inheritance, we have to start with this guy named Mendel. This Mendel guy did the same thing we were doing with cats, but with peas. He bred yellow peas and green peas to learn more about how genes worked, and he discovered that each organism has 2 copies of every gene, and that you inherit 1 copy from each parent. We call these copies alleles, and we can write them using letters. In Mendel's pea plants, the dominant allele is the one for yellow. So, we write an allele that codes for yellow as capital Y, and an allele that codes for green as lowercase y. If a pea plant has at least one dominant capital Y allele, the pea plant looks yellow because the capital Y dominates. We can see what happens when we breed 2 pea plants by setting up a special kind of table called a Punnett square. Parent 1 is on top, and parent 2 is on the side. According to Mendel, you inherit 1 allele from each parent, so we can write out all the possibilities for the offspring like this. This table says that if we breed these 2 plants, we should get green half the time and yellow half the time. And that's exactly what Mendel found. This type of inheritance is relatively simple, but it doesn't seem to match what we have going with calico cats. Turns out, there's more than one way to skin a cat. The sex of the cat has something to do with it, because remember, the vast majority of calicos are female. Luckily, people kept doing research after Mendel. Later down the line, a different scientist named Morgan proposed the idea of sex-linked inheritance. Certain genes, Morgan said, could be found on the X and Y chromosomes, the ones that determine your sex. These genes act differently between men and women, because women have 2 X chromosomes, and men have 1 X and 1 Y. A common example of this is balding. Here's a Punnett square of 1 female with 1 baldness allele X little b, and 1 hair allele X big B, and 1 male with hair, X big B, Y. We write the baldness/hair alleles with an X because they are found on the X chromosome in real life. Women are much less likely to be bald because baldness is recessive, and for a woman, both their X chromosomes would have to have the recessive baldness allele. Men, on the other hand, would only need to have one copy of that allele, because they only have one X chromosome. This means that some women can be carriers for baldness, and baldness can be secretly passed down to you from your mother's side, even if none of your immediate relatives are bald. Still, it looks like calico coats work differently. Instead of just a dominant and recessive color, these cats can be either orange, gray, or calico. Okay, I did some more digging in this book, and I have an answer. It's time to let the cat out of the bag. Calico is a sex-linked trait, but it's slightly different from baldness. We can replace the capital and lowercase b's with a capital O and capital G. Instead of either allele being dominant, both alleles are. When a cat has both an O allele and a G allele, each cell in its body randomly chooses one of them to be when the cat is still an embryo, through a process called x-inactivation. As the cat grows, those cells duplicate, and then you start to see those patches form. Since the two dominant alleles share dominance in the cat, we call the calico trait codominant. But remember, calico is sex-linked. The gene for it is on the X chromosome, so the only cats that can have both the orange and gray alleles are females. Males only have one X chromosome, so they could either be only orange or gray. That's why only females can be calico. If we go back to our breeding experiments from earlier, we can draw a Punnett square and see how things start to make sense. Here's the case of a calico female and a gray male. The Punnett square says 1/4 will be orange, 1/2 will be gray, and 1/4 will be calico. And that checks out with our experimental results. Here's the case of an orange female and a gray male. If the offspring is a male, they have to have a Y chromosome from the father, which means the X chromosome has to come from the mother. And the mother's X chromosomes are both orange. So any male offspring that comes from that mother has to be orange. And any female offspring has to have the father's gray X chromosome and one of the mother's orange X chromosomes. So they have to be calico. And that checks out with these results too. Now, very rarely, some male cats can be born with an extra X chromosome, which allows them to be calico, just like a female. That's the dude I interviewed earlier. The fact that nature is so complicated, but at the same time understandable, is one of my favorite things about biology.